Welcome to TARTLEcast with your hosts Alexander McKegg and Jason Rigby, where humanity steps into the future and source data defines the path.
Jason, do you, in ancient Egypt,
yes,
as you were going into the afterlife, you would have to meet Osiris, okay? And Osiris, there was a couple of steps that would actually happen, but the heart was actually taken out before someone was mummified, and that was put into a canopic jar. I can't believe I remember that. A canopic jar. I think that's what it's called. And so as that transitions into the afterlife, your heart was actually weighed, right? They were trying to find a balance.
Mm.
And it was a balance of how you actually lived your life. So the data that they were measuring was the weight of the heart against some sort of feather. I forget what the feather was, to see if your life was in balance. And they're like, is that data in balance? And if it was a light heart, right, you'd be on to the next step where you go in front of like these 60 whatever judges or whatever, and you'd be judged on all the things you did in your life if you were a good person. But what we find is that even in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, we are doing this same thing now, albeit slowly, in a very, poor job on a government level for looking at how equitable we are with measuring data across different demographics. And what we want to touch on is, are people represented properly with the information that is currently available, right? So there's massive amounts of data, especially in very urban populations. And are we looking at that data and, affording change or, projects or funding into certain things that should be in the city that require them more than, say, just restoring a park that's already in a highly wealthy area?
Right.
So I want to touch on this article here. What's the title of the article?
No, it's called "Is Your Data Equitable? A new tool to measure representation in data."
Okay, so
this just came out.
Yeah,
yesterday.
And was it Harvard published this?
Yes.
So what we are focusing on is that how is it that we can represent specific demographics in urban populations? And if they are underrepresented, how do we find value data to show that? But one of the initial issues before we can even get into that step is that the government entity is doing a very poor job of taking publicly available data, analyzing it, and putting it into their decision-making. So what they're getting is, whether it's a function of corruption or perverse incentives, whatever it might be, will draw their attention away from data that's actually showing them where they should put time and resources. And they're putting into things that actually shouldn't deserve it.
Our old school mentality, because the average age keeps growing with city councils and mayors.
That keeps growing. So you have people that are from, the queens of the Stone Age are still making rules for people that are trying to develop much quicker. And if you're looking at economic disparity within urban populations, we can analyze that data. Where a grocery store sits, right? It's not called a bodega. Where a bodega might sit, the prices are much higher, and it's actually keeping people, beneath the poverty level because they have to continually pay more for those resources because it's hard for them to get access to these, maybe like a local Walmart, right? Or some other big box thing where they can actually get a larger amount of groceries more efficiently. And comparing that data is all possible. It's just been ignored.
Mm-hmm.
So the issue here is that they're ignoring the data that needs to have light shed on it, even though it's publicly available data.
Well, and I know companies have come in and offered to help cities, I know alone here in Albuquerque, I talked with a data CEO, and he's like, we came to help the city police department and said, our data can find out, in these certain areas, at this park or this place or whatever, that why is there crime happening there from 2 to 3 a.m.?
Yeah.
3 nights a week. What if we put a light pole up, shine the light there because it's really dark? Or what if we had an officer go there from 2 to 3?
Yeah, correct.
An officer sitting there in his car from 2 to 3. And then now we've eliminated crime there, and then we find another spot and we can be real strategic with data. But instead, what was happening? Well, I don't trust. They don't trust. That's what they were saying, because it's, 65 and older.
Yeah.
I don't trust that. It's like, how could you not?
What do you mean you don't trust it? We're trying to decrease crime, you know?
How can you not trust the data when it, so because where does the source of the data come from? Your officers.
Yeah, that's right.
that had to fill out a report of a past action.
So do you want it? So CIA World Fact Book plus your officers, they're all lying. So let's consider something here. So when you look at certain demographics, some demographics produce more data than others.
Right,
so
of
poor
course.
demographics don't produce that much data. They have less devices.
Right.
They're less connected. Okay. They're not using as many tools because they don't have the availability to purchase those tools.
Right.
So naturally, you're going to have an asymmetry on what's being analyzed. So the focus is obviously going to be on the, wealthier demographic areas, especially in urban populations. So they're the ones getting all the Wi-Fi hotspots. But if you start looking at it, it's like, okay, if we put Wi-Fi hotspots using the public data we have available in the poorer demographics,
Right.
we can actually increase an availability of opportunity and education in that area, maybe even economic growth. But that sort of disparity, finding that equitability in the data, it lacks balance right now because they also lack the connectivity and the resources that people in a wealthier demographic naturally have. So if a city's trying to strike that balance, they need to look at the data and look to see, are they being equitable with how they're actually analyzing it from that sort of perspective?
And I don't want to just be negative because and that's why I was typing up on here, guys. I don't know if you heard about the Rockford, Illinois study with a plan to end homelessness.
Yeah.
And so they got together and said, it's a 150,000 person city. It's 90 miles northwest of Chicago. And they said by the end of the year, we want to have zero homeless. So there was 700 homeless people. So, that's it's 150,000
Sure.
small city, but you can scale this out. So they decided to say, what can we do to get this to zero? So what they found out was, well, let's collect data. Let's go out and have the officers and people, let's put it all on one. Let's get it in, Excel sheet or whatever they were using at the time. I think it was pretty rudimentary, just an Excel sheet, but let's go find these people's names. Let's have conversations with them. Let's get all 700 names. Now
primary source data. How many times, like I said, you have to go to the person, right? If you want to solve
we made it. So this is what the mayor did. This is an awesome study. And you guys, there's a Fast Company article on it. You guys should read it because it's really cool because homelessness is rampant, here in the United States. So they took all 700 of the homeless people in the city, put all the names, put what issues they were facing when they talked to them. Is it, mental illness? Is it, just down on their luck? They lost their job, whatever it may be. Then they got all 700, they got the data. They took all the resources, whether it was the police department, whether it was the homeless shelters, anybody that had community outreach, and he brought them all in a room together. And he said, we're going to sit here and go over 700 names. And we're going to do this. I don't know if he did it weekly or monthly or whatever. And we're going to talk about it. Well, what he found out was, I talked to him and he stayed in my homeless shelter the other day and he told me this. Oh, I talked to her and she was this, and, we can put them in this house. Oh, well, I can help them with this. And so then all these community outreach begin to, instead of being, as governments do, instead of being silos and worried about their own they begin to work together almost at zero homelessness now in 1 year.
No, that's amazing. And that collectiveness, they were equitable with how they were analyzing the data.
Yes.
Because they looked to people that were producing zero data.
Yes.
And they had to go to them directly.
Yes.
And the only way you can be equitable with your analysis, right, and pushing out resources is if you actually include everyone. And so you need tools that properly include those people and afford them opportunity at the same time. And if you can strike that balance, you're doing something special as a government. And that way you'll put the Wi-Fi hotspot in the right place. You'll put a local, what is it? The emergency care center. There's a bunch of them.
Or the subway is busy at these certain times, but it's not efficient to have it run at that time.
No, but
So it's not efficient for the city with their budget. But so now you have to make people wait an extra 20, 30 minutes to get on when you should be running.
And that 20, 30 minutes, let me tell you what happens.
Yes.
I've seen this in Philadelphia. The working parent, mom or dad, doesn't matter. They've lost now an hour commute ways, both ways. They don't have time to go home and cook now. They've been working 12, 14 hours. What are they going to do? They're going to go right over to the McDonald's and get their kids a meal that lacks a massive amount of nutrition.
Right.
And everybody's going to get fed on that for $1.50 a piece. and they're not going to go to the bodega because it's too expensive. They're not going to cook, and there's no local grocery store in sight. So there's like this weird food scarcity. And because an action that happened, a systemic action of the government saying, okay, this is not cost effective enough for us to be like, to be running this. We're going to cut it back an extra 30 minutes. It's not about you being cost effective. You're here for the benefit of the public, not yourself.
Right.
Figure that out.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And that's why you screwed up so much with your data, because your perspective has been about you. How can we analyze data so we can get a bigger value for ourselves?
And it's that way with the companies that are collecting data too. Like you said on our earlier podcast, that you guys will have to go and watch.
How do I get a bigger annuity stream for me?
Yes.
Not how do I give the power, the choice, and the tools back to people and give the annuity stream to them? A government has resources. They can always ask for more resources. And if your citizens are doing well, you will naturally do well. It's not if you do well, the citizens do well. Wrong. Okay? You have to uplift people first. They are the foundation of who you are. So if you want to be equitable with the data and how you analyze it and how you actually look at human beings for being human beings.
Yes. And I think you're seeing this shift. And I think COVID was a good thing. I was listening to a podcast earlier, and they were talking, the CEO was talking about, having people only come to work, twice a week, or they could come 5 days a week and then they get a whole week off, and now all of a sudden people are like, well, I could probably, if I'm only going to the office, a few times, a week, or I'm only going to, 1 or 2 weeks out of the month, I could probably live an hour and a half away.
Well, that's cool. And now people that were otherwise excluded because of their social status, right? And, or not social status, demographic, right? Their socioeconomic status. That's what I meant. If they were excluded because they don't have a car to, go to where that business is, now opportunity has opened up for people that didn't have opportunity. And that's the beauty about remote work. But you also have to get those people online, right? It's a function of connectivity at the same time. So remote work's great as long as you have the ability to get on the internet. But now there's a greater opportunity for more people to join up, more people to find prosperity for themselves by taking responsibility, saying, oh, this is now available. I gotta go get that.
I love that. That's perfect.
Yeah, I think that's pretty neat.
I think we should end it.
All right, cool deal.
This is cool. Thank guys.
You.
Thank you for listening to TARTLEcast with your hosts Alexander McKegg and Jason Rigby, where humanity steps into the future and source data defines the path. What's your data worth?